Hey everyone, let's talk about English. We all have this idea in our heads, right? That there's one correct way to speak it. But think about it. Nearly 2 billion people speak this language. So is that idea of one proper English even a thing anymore? That's exactly what we're going to dig into today. What does correct English really mean in our global world?
So let's start with the big one. What is correct English? Seriously, what pops into your head? Is it, the very proper English you might hear from the royal family? Or maybe the English from a major news network? What about the version your teacher insisted on back in school? Well, the truth is, it's a lot more complicated and way more interesting than any of that.
And you know what? This isn't a new idea. The famous linguist David Crystal hit the nail on the head way back in 1998 with this quote. He said, "We need to prepare for a world of staggering linguistic diversity." I love that phrase. And he was so right. It's even more true now. English isn't just one single thing. It's this massive global language with all these amazing local variations.
And here's the thing you've got to remember. Everyone has an accent. Everyone. Me, you, everybody. And we all have a dialect, too. There's no such thing as a neutral or no accent way of speaking. That's just a myth. Your accent and dialect are just a natural part of who you are and where you're from. It doesn't matter if you're in London, Lagos, or Los Angeles, the way you speak is a legitimate variety of English. It's not a mistake or a deviation. It's just different. And that variation, that's totally normal.
Okay, so to really grasp this idea of diversity, we first have to talk about scale. Because the numbers, wow, the numbers behind English are absolutely staggering.
So let's do a quick pop quiz. How many people do you think speak English as their first language? Just take a wild guess. What number comes to mind? Got it?
All right, the answer is about 400 million. And yeah, that's a ton of people. But, and this is the crazy part, that's not even close to the whole story.
Okay, now this is where your jaw might drop. Look at this chart. You've got your 400 million native speakers, right? Well, there are another 400 million people who use it as an official second language. And then, look at that last bar. That's about 1 billion people who speak it as a foreign language. Let that sink in. For every one native speaker, there are 3, maybe even 4 non-native speakers. The bottom line is huge. Non-native speakers are the overwhelming majority of English users on this planet.
So, how on earth do we even begin to organize all this? It seems chaotic, right? Well, back in the 80s, a linguist named Biraj Kachru came up with a super useful way to visualize it. It's called the 3 circles model, and it really helps make sense of the global spread of English.
Okay, first up, you've got the inner circle. This is pretty straightforward. Think of these as the places where English got its start. These are the countries that traditionally set the standards, the rules of grammar and pronunciation that get taught in textbooks. They're the norm setters.
And yeah, the countries here are no surprise. The UK, the US, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. For ages, the English spoken in these places was seen as the gold standard, the target for anyone learning the language.
Then we move out to the outer circle. Now, these are countries where English has been around for a long, long time, often because of colonial history. It's used in government, in schools, and business. But here's the really important part. These countries are norm developing. They're not just copying the inner circle. Nope. They are creating their own unique, perfectly valid standard versions of English. They're making their own rules.
We're talking about massive countries here. Places like India, Nigeria, Singapore, the Philippines, Kenya. And they have their own vibrant forms of English. You might have heard of Singlish in Singapore, for example. These aren't mistakes or bad English. They are fully formed, rule-based varieties of the language used by millions of people every single day.
And finally, the biggest circle of them all, the expanding circle. This is basically the rest of the world. China, Brazil, Germany, Japan, you name it. This is where most people learn English as a foreign language, as a tool to connect with the rest of the globe. And traditionally, these countries have been norm-dependent. That just means they look to the inner circle, the UK, the US, for the rules to learn.
Right. But here's where the whole model starts to get a fascinating twist. You have over 1 billion people in that expanding circle. So what happens when a business person from Brazil starts talking English to an engineer from Japan? That's when something entirely new starts to happen.
And that's what we call English as a lingua franca, or ELF for short. ELF isn't about passing a test or sounding like a native speaker. It's about English as a tool,
A practical, get-the-job-done bridge between people who don't share a first language. This is the English of global business, of international conferences, of tourism. It's English in the wild. This comparison here really lays it all out. Traditional English learning, EFL, is all about aiming for perfection, trying to sound like a native speaker from the UK or US. But ELF? It has a completely different mission. The goal isn't perfection, it's communication. It's not about being correct, it's about being clear. Can we understand each other? If the answer is yes, then mission accomplished.
So what does this actually sound like? Well, you see some common patterns emerge. For example, that little S at the end of verbs in the third person, like in he likes, often it just gets dropped. He like it. Why? Because it doesn't really affect the meaning, and it's one less rule to worry about. Or you might hear, we discussed about the plan. Or a universal tag question like, isn't it, used for everything. Now, a traditional teacher might call these mistakes. But in the world of ELF, they're not mistakes at all. They're smart shortcuts. They're features that make the language more efficient for communication between non-native speakers.
Whoa, okay. This quote is definitely meant to be a bit shocking, but it makes a really powerful point. Whittleson is basically saying that since most conversations in English today don't even include a native speaker, those native speakers don't really get a say in how the language evolves anymore. English doesn't belong to them. Its future is being written, right now, by its billions of global users.
Okay, so let's bring this all back home. What does all of this mean for you? For anyone learning or teaching or just using English in their daily life? It means we might need to completely change how we think about fluency and what it even means to be good at English.
Look, for the vast majority of people learning English, it's a tool, not a hobby. It's for getting a job, or traveling, or understanding a movie. Reaching a solid, good enough level, what we might call B1 or B2, is often perfectly fine for those goals. Trying to get from good to native level perfect takes a huge amount of effort for very little extra benefit. It's a classic case of diminishing returns. People have other things to do. They have careers, families, other languages to learn. So for most of the world, success in English isn't about perfection. It's about being an effective, confident communicator.
And all of this brings us back to that one final, really important question. If English is this shared global language, and if the main goal is just clear communication, then who actually gets to decide what's correct anymore? That's a huge shift in thinking, and it's something we're all going to have to grapple with. Thanks for diving into this with me.